Hello, everybody. I am Matt Carvalho, and with me is my guest, former Barrington, New York City Councilman, Mr. Freeman. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. I'm very pleased to be here with you, Mr. Carvalho.
Thank you for joining me. And today, my first question is, what is it that made you want to get into politics?
Well, it was my community I was living in, and decisions were being made that I had no voice in, and that I didn't necessarily agree with. And so I thought, well, if I don't participate, if I don't get involved, then it will be hard for me to have my best interest taken care of. And this is it's my best interest to be involved in this politics.
And as a politician, how do you think you helped the community once you got in?
Well, a very unique and different kind of voice. Not that my voice is unique to the world, but to people in that community, which was a very homogenized community. I think it was helpful for them to hear that there are other ideas, other ways of looking at the issues that were involved, a different perspective, um, and to represent other people who had some similar thoughts, but also thought that they didn't have the power to do anything different about what was going on.
And last time we spoke, you told me that you were the only African American Democrat elected in your entire city. How are you perceived by your fellow councilmen, and how are you able to work through the adversity?
Well, I was perceived by my fellow councilmen as an outsider, someone who was not quite a part of their community, just by my party affiliations. I think they saw me as against them rather than for the people in my neighborhood or in our town. So it became a personal us and them rather than that I was there not against them but to represent a whole different faction. Also, because I'm African American, they had no sense that I could have an equal understanding of the needs of the total community, just because that's a historical aspect of racism, which is always a contempt for other human beings. And so the issue was how to deal with a different voice and how to represent a different group of people. And for me, how to deal with contempt of racism.
Now, what would you say was your biggest contribution to the city as a councilman, and what do you would also say was your biggest mistake as a councilman?
Well, I can start first with my biggest mistake is that I didn't always understand the process of compromise. And that was because I had not been in that position to fully understand what I was willing to sacrifice around some issues for the greater good of getting other issues resolved. It was just a matter of not knowing and needing to learn. First time politicians and not having a mentor, someone to help sort of guide me so very much. I think my mistake was I was hard to compromise. So, but my greatest contribution is that was that we had a town that did not have a good ethics board. We had an ethics committee, but not an ethics board. And so I insisted that we have an ethics board that had greater power and teeth to help manage the just behaviors of other council people. That was very difficult and met with a lot of resistance, and it took me all 4 years to get it pushed through, but that was my greatest contribution to our whole community. Because it's easy for corruption to start taking root, or has taken root, to call people's attention to this has to be ethical, what you do. It's the trust of the people. So that was my greatest contribution.
Now, so you were a councilman. That not a lot of people are very informed with city politicians. What were some of your regular basic duties as a councilman? What was the things that you
My
found?
basic duty was to show up twice a month at the meetings for the total time that the meetings were being held. My other responsibility was to know the agenda and have a good sense of the issues involved in the agendas that were going to be there. My biggest responsibility was to go and talk to the people when I knew there was an issue coming up, to not only go to my immediate neighbors, but other segments of the community and say, I'm going to this meeting, this is the issue, do you have something you'd like for me to think about in my response to it? So talking to the people, showing up at the meetings, knowing what the agenda was going to be, were the three priorities for me.
And so, when you would go to meet with the people, did they approve of you more because you would go and speak with them and ask their opinions on things?
In fact, yes. When I ran for office, one of the things that people would often say to me is no one had ever come to them to ask them their feelings and thoughts about the issues of the town. Because the people who were in power had been in power for so long they had forgotten to go down dirt roads and dusty trailers and hog farms or wherever the people were. They just simply asked. So I think people appreciated that they were feeling included.
Now, what is it that made you want to exit from the political realm?
Well, after my 4 years as a councilman, in between time, I also did run for county legislative process and commitment. So I didn't really want to fully disengage, but one of the things I learned in those 4 years of being councilman is that it's tough to have a private life of your own, or a personal life. You call all hours of the day. You have to be constantly alert to how you're perceived, to favors people want to do for you. It's a whole level of being conscious always. The fact that you're responsible for public trust. People trust you. Um, People feel they have a right to move into your personal life as far as they want to call you out all hours of night, day, and I just ran out of energy for that.
And now that you're here in Rhode Island, have you ever considered going into Rhode Island politics?
Well, I first considered that I needed to know Rhode Island. It has a history, and I felt that I'd like to think about going into Rhode Island politics, but I need to really take time and know the history of Rhode Island itself, and then the character of the people, what the kinds of needs are, uh, and so just starting in that process, and I'm doing that by being here at the Rhode Island State House, both as a docent for the State House, as well as working in the Visitor Center, and just being in the environment here at the State House and listening to some of the critical issues from taking a visit at the General Assembly.
Now, sticking on that, has your job, like, what some of the specific things you've learned from just hearing around and working at the State House?
Well, one of the things that I've learned is the dichotomy of the Rhode Island history that is still in existence today. By that I mean, Rhode Island being founded on the principle of justice and religious freedom, and the equality of all people on the one hand. On the other hand, this is a state or a colony of a state that has done some terrible things for the marginalized people. It has been very generous in terms of social justice on the one hand. It has also had a history of its own corruption. It may not be unique just to Rhode Island, but it's the kind of thing that I have to come to grips with. How will I negotiate just living in this state that has that history, to say nothing of looking at how the politics are managed here, and do I have both the energy and the moral fortitude to be a part of that? I don't know if that answers your question, but there's a lot to learn about Rhode Island. I moved here because there's a lot to admire and to be a part of, but I also recognize that it does have its history.
And now, when you're working and giving tours or in the gift shop, now, you've seen many politicians walk in and out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do they perceive you, and how do they act towards you, and do they seem like more like a real person, or do they seem kind of scripted?
Well, I think the truth of that is whatever's on their mind in a particular day. Many of them walk in, they're sort of startled because they haven't been in the visitor center before, or I have I don't sound like a Rhode Islander in terms of my speech pattern, or they are very generous in chatting as if they aren't sure just what my role is here. They, I think they're sort of surprised sometimes as well. They don't know about the volunteers at the State House to appreciate that you get a range of people. But, I mean, I'm fairly outgoing. I don't let people not acknowledge me or to treat me in ways that I think are not reasonable.
Now, later tonight we'll have the governor giving her State of the State address. What is your opinion on Governor Raimondo's administration and her job performance thus far?
Well, I happen to like her very, very much. I think that she is in a very powerful position, and that she knows that. I think she knows how to move up and down the scale of meeting with the ordinary common man, woman, citizen, as well as dealing with kings and queens and other leaders of the world. She's very skilled that way, and I think she has a lot to have to um, reconcile in terms of the monetary, budgetary problems with Rhode Island, the tax issues, the size of the state. I think that the dynamics of constantly keeping all those elements in her head when she's dealing with laws and bills and the legislature and the judicial system. I just am in great admiration of her for managing things as well as she has, keeping the balance.
Now, we're gonna take that and flip it 180.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on President Donald Trump's administration and his job performance?
Well, I did not vote for him. I would not vote for him. And I just feel so sad for the country. This is a great and unique country with a great and unique perspective of justice and democracy. And to have a person who appears not to have the capacity to hold this country in great esteem rather than in great contempt uh, saddens me. We have so much to lose. We are not a world power beyond other world powers. We are a part of the world. You know, there's an interconnectedness that I think Donald Trump doesn't seem to fully understand. Um, because I feel intensely and acutely attuned to racism just by my history in this country. I have no doubt that his racist behaviors just belittles the country and the goodwill of the people. But I also know that we've been through this before. And so I feel saddened, but I'm not disheartened. This country will survive him as it has others who are similar.
And do you think he should probably silence his Twitter when saying things like "Little Rocket Man" and "shithole countries" and among other questionable remarks that he says?
I think he should not just silence his Twitter, um, but I think he should. Well, I, the problem I have with his behavior on Twitter, etc., is his attempt to manipulate and silence the press, the free press. I mean, I know the press is a part of a larger system and a part of the fourth estate of the organization of a government, but I think his attack on the press, that he uses Twitter as a weapon as opposed to a means of communication for the goodwill of the people, is just disgraceful. A weapon is a weapon is a weapon, and words can be weapons. And a pen is mightier than the sword or the Twitter. So I just think he should imagine what it means to people to hear him say those kinds of words. You know, the hearts and minds of people are hurt. I don't think he understands what it means to hurt people's feelings. Um, but who said he was going to be that way anyway? So, I don't want to rage against him, but I do want to rage against him.
Well, with that, switching a little bit from politics to something else. What is it that made you want to become? You told me you were a psychotherapist.
I'm a psychotherapist. I had been started off my career after my undergraduate work, Freeman Kodak Company, and worked there for a number of years. And friends of mine who were in the mental health field had said to me that they thought I had a kind of innate sense of understanding people's needs and listening to people's inner self and uh, being compassionate, and a number of words that are words of our profession. And so I trusted those people, seeing that in me, and decided that I would go to school. I went to the University of Buffalo for my master's degree in clinical social work, and worked both in a community setting, and then discovered that I also uh, wanted to do a lot of more in-depth work with people in private practice, and to help people understand their humanness, their anguish, their problems, their struggles, to help them have a perspective on themselves that would allow their better selves to emerge, um, to appreciate true mental illness, to understand the power to make change. So all those things began to grow in me as something I could help facilitate. So that's started me on this road of admiring the courage of people to continue to try to find solutions to the problems and to facilitate that courage taking hold.
And now, what would you say is your method to helping others, and how do you go about doing that in the field of psychology?
Well, my first overall process is to recognize that I don't have the power to make people different and change people. That all I have the power to do is facilitate them coming to their own decisions about changing their lives. That's very humbling for me to come to know. Um, to recognize that all people have a right to self-determination, that your life belongs to you and not to me, that I can't judge you. I can only help you look at the judgments you have of yourself and help you discover the best judgments about yourself. So that's an overall approach to the work that I have. Um, and to appreciate that we all come in this world with different skills, different limitations, different struggles, and to admire people when they knock on my door. I just admire the courage that people bring to coming into therapy. It's quite unique when you walk into my door as a client. I think they have the power to come here. They have the power to, and their courage to come here. They have the power and courage to overcome whatever the issues are.
And would you say, were some of the more stranger cases that you dealt with your patients?
Well, I think some of those stranger cases are people for whom they have already committed their being to death, meaning that they had not seen themselves as being alive, and they have seen suicide as the solution to the pain. And I remember a young man of 22 who, by the time he came to see me, I was hopeful for him, and he was hopeful for himself. But the pain and anguish of all of his life had just overwhelmed him. And he said, no matter what you say and what we do here, when it's over with, I still won't be in existence. And several months after we finished, he did kill himself. He already knew. And I think it's hard to understand how someone knows, how someone can reach that conclusion, and to sit opposite with it, know that you don't have the power to change it. Oh, but there are other people who come in feeling also desperate and not worthy of living, who have made different choices. There's enough fire left in them to say yes to life.
And well, my last question is, what advice would you give to, say, a youth that would be interested in getting into politics, as well as just some general life advice?
Well, I think that my first advice would be to believe in oneself, that there's a basic goodness in oneself that they will hold on to, and that they will decide to do the very best that they can in the interest of the people that they have asked to trust them. To say, you voted for me, and you believe in me, and I believe in me, and no matter what is said of me by whomever, I will not let myself down, and I will not let those people who believe in me down. And if I can't stand up to what I have said, have the courage to come to the people who trusted me and say, I have said that I will do this, this, and this, and I can't. Things have changed, or I'm not strong enough, or the system isn't ready for this, whatever. But to have the courage to let people know that the trust that they've placed in you is not misplaced. And to do exactly what you're doing, just to talk to as many people as possible, get as many ideas, to interview people, to find the right questions to ask. Because your question to me is not just an answer to you from me, but it also allows me to think more clearly about what is it I'm saying. Do I mean it? Am I being real? So you've given me an opportunity to review once again my own experience, my own knowledge, my own belief, my own honesty. So this is something special that's happening between both of us. And you're interviewing people, give people that opportunity.
Well, those are some wise words, and that's all the questions we have. And thank you very much for doing this.
You're certainly welcome. Thank you for asking me. I sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you.